Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third day of Real World Crypto. We have a session on post-quantum cryptography. And the first speaker is Benjamin Smith from INRIA. He's going to speak about quantum-resistant security for software updates on low-power network embedded devices. Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning. Thank you to the Real World for having us this morning, for giving us the opportunity to share this project with you. I've been asked to announce something to we happy few who have got out of bed this morning. Is Daniel Slemanig from the Austrian Institute of Technology here? Yeah, if you could come up here, we have a special thing we have to do. Specifically you. And it's, it's nice to meet you. I've never met you before. Yeah. But you're my anti-particle, evil twin.
I see.
So, I mean, well, in the coffee break, maybe we'll actually find out what we do or something.
That's nice.
Basically, everyone here has someone, whether you know it or not. If you take your name tag out and look inside, you'll find the name of someone. Maybe you know them, probably you don't. Because, I mean, it's a crypto conference, of course you don't know most people. And your mission, the steering committee has decided for today, in the coffee break, in the lunch break, or during this talk, if you don't want to listen to it, you should find your evil twin and get to meet them, get to talk to them. Thanks for, sorry to embarrass you like this. But yeah.
Probably let's talk later, right?
Yeah, but we'll talk later. Yeah, the next level of the game would be asking him to give my talk, but sorry, won't do that. Okay, so there are 5 of us. We're basically all working for INRIA or the Freie Universität of Berlin. We've got an ACNS paper covering all this stuff with a lot of detail. We're going to basically really pick out a couple of results and go as quickly as we can this morning. But if this interests you and you want more detail, you can find our paper by going to ePrint and searching the author box for Zandberg or Bacelli. And this will be the unique hit. Okay. And that's basically because this project is like an interdisciplinary project where we're working with people that we'd never worked with before, on something that was really new to me at least, which was trying to secure an actual operating system. So you know that security is not constant with respect to time. Okay. Things get broken, and then we have to fix them. And when you're talking about fixing software, once it's been deployed, this means you have to update it. Okay, so you're not going to have any kind of meaningful, or certainly no long-term security if you don't have an update strategy. But of course, when you're updating something, that's an attack vector in itself. Your update packages can have malware, or there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So you need updates to secure what you're doing, and you have your sort of chicken and your egg. You need your update to be secure itself. So you can't secure what you can't update securely. And that's the problem we're trying to solve today in one particular area, which is low-end IoT devices. So this is low computing power, low memory, low everything. On the other hand, really high diversity, high heterogeneity, and really high pervasion. So we're talking about lots of different devices of different kinds in different places, but all basically sort of low end. All of these devices, however, for us, are running Riot OS, and Riot is a free community-driven operating system. It's for low-end IoT devices. So low-end, what we mean is basically, this is the Linux when you can't run Linux. Okay, so we're talking about small things, sort of sub-Raspberry Pi or whatever, microcontrollers basically, and so you need a minimal operating system to give you the services to run your app. And so Riot is something that I think you should try out. You can get it from this link. It's really easy to develop for. You can just develop in C, C++. There's some support for Rust now. When you do this, you are supporting potentially up to 240 different platforms or more. So that's the current count, 68 different CPUs. So this is really meant to run all over the place, the sorts of apps that we're doing here. And I mean, a typical crypto implementation talk, you'll be saying, all right, well, we ran it on this platform, we switched everything else off, we tuned everything as hard as we could, and we're now the fastest thing in the world. And we're going for something orthogonal to that, where it's like, we're not going to tune anything specifically for any one place. We want something that will run on as many of these platforms as we can and provide some measure of security. So there is already a secure update path for Riot. It implements the SUIT standard. SUIT is secure updates for the Internet of Things, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. SUIT, I mean, there's a lot of metadata for updating. There's let's say some logistics and bureaucracy involved, and then for cryptographers, at the heart of it, there's a signature, obviously. Okay, you've got a signed update. You need to verify the signature. Those signatures are ECC signatures. Okay, so ED 25519 or ECDSA on P256. And so the question is, looking at long-term security, given that like a lot of IoT devices can be deployed for a very, very long time, like 10, 20, even 30 years, we need long-term security. So what about post-quantum alternatives? Is this something that's realistic? Is it something that's achievable? Maybe you think, well, I'm sure we can do that, but it's terrible. So we basically set out to find out. This is what SUIT looks like. So this is the game that we're playing. You've got a maintainer, the person writing and deploying the app and the devices, and then you've got your device. And phase 0, you commission your device. That means you install your software on it. And crucially here, you also install your public key. So we're talking about signatures where the public key that you're verifying against is already on the device with you. We're not talking about transmitting public keys all the time or anything like this. It's really pre-installed. Maybe you could include a new one in an update and override it or something if you want, but fundamentally, the key does not have to be sent. It's already there. Then you build your update, you hash it, you sign it with the metadata, you upload this to a repository. At some point, the device checks if it needs to be updated. It downloads this, it checks the signature. If everything's fine, it installs the update. Okay, so really the critical thing here is, I guess, that the key is already on the device, and the rest is probably more or less what you would imagine. So we're trying to, this is a measurement exercise, basically, trying to plug post-quantum security into this. So our pre-quantum baseline, the elliptic curve signatures, generally you look at, we're used to thinking, right, public key size, signature size, that's like our fundamental metric of this stuff, and then the only question is how fast it is. So when you go to post-quantum, you're looking at 1 or 2 orders of magnitude larger for the public key, for the signatures. Here rather than looking at all the numbers, I really just want to tell you what we implemented, which was dilithium, Falcon, and LMS. Okay, dilithium and Falcon are both NIST candidates, so they're obvious things to try to implement. LMS, Leighton-McCulley signatures, this is not a NIST candidate, but it is being standardized for this application. Okay, so this is like the new standard, and then we're testing this against the NIST things as well. LMS is a stateful hash-based signature. This is exactly the kind of use case where state is actually not a problem, because, for example, your operating system update has a version number on it, and it's being issued by one person and so on. So maintaining state is something that's possible in this situation. So you can see that there's advantages and disadvantages in the public key and signature columns. The private key, we don't really care. What I want to point out here is that your signature is not taken in isolation. There's context. It's included in the manifest, which has all the metadata of the update, and that's where the signature goes. So when you think, oh, I'm going to dilithium, I'm going to have a signature that's 40 times bigger, well, that blow up is actually already kind of, a lot of it is eaten up by the fact that you already had 419 bytes worth of metadata, and that's not changing. So the actual blow up in what looks like the signature, in your extra data to secure the update, it's only like a factor of 6. So we need to take this sort of context into account. Here I've got 2 flavors of dilithium. The dynamic dilithium, these are arguably terrible names, but they're my fault. Dynamic dilithium is just plain old dilithium. When you're running dilithium, you're going to sort of blow up this seed into some matrices on the fly. Static dilithium, we just compute those in advance and store them with the keys. Okay, that's a terrible idea if you're trying to do, I don't know, like post-quantum TLS or something like that, where you actually need to send keys around. But if you're just going to be using the one manufacturer key the whole time, why not? This is going to save you some work later. So there are our 2 flavors here. There are 240 platforms. We didn't test them all. We didn't even try. We just picked 3 sort of representative ones. So 3 different architectures, different configurations. ARM, ESP32, and a RISC-V board. Here the RISC, well, you can see a little bit of a difference in terms of the resources that you've got, like the RAM and the flash, so the memory that you have to store things. The RISC-V board, for example, it actually ran our things faster, but on the other hand, there were things that it just couldn't do because it has, like 1/8 of the memory that the ARM board has. Today we'll just talk about the ARM board. But I'm showing you this to emphasize that we really care about portability in this project. Okay, we really need to have things that run everywhere. So there's no assembly, there's no platform-specific tricks, there's no funny intrinsics. We're aiming really for the lowest common denominator here. Okay, so taking a simple, in particular, we're taking open source implementations, because it's to go with an open source operating system. And we're taking things that are minimal and simple, so here we used a lot of stuff from PQ Clean. We have to make some modifications to make it work under Riot, so you basically have to do all your memory yourself. So malloc is gone, it's not the same libc if you like. But these are quite simple, obvious modifications to make. So when you look at the time and the resources that these things are taking, I mean, already for the elliptic curve signatures, we've got 2 implementations of ED 25519, which you can compare here. And you can see that, one of them, the top one, is really tuned for space. So it's a very simple, implementation that doesn't use a lot of things like pre-computed points or computing points to do window scalar multiplication or anything like this. So it's really slow, but it's very small. Or there's the opposite approach where you blow up like tables of points, so use more memory, and then get down to 40 milliseconds. So even comparing with the elliptic curve baseline, you're not going to go, well, we're like 20 times faster, because it depends. The elliptic curve baseline can be 50 times slower than itself. But you can see that generally, post-quantum signatures, as you might expect, they're typically faster to verify than an elliptic curve signature, apart from LMS, which is a bit slower. But you're going to pay for this typically in terms of stack or in terms of the actual code size, the program that's installed to do it. Here, for example, when you look at plain old standard dynamic dilithium, you can see that here it needs too much stack. Like there's 36K of stack. There's only 32 available on the RISC-V board, so we just couldn't run this full stop. Then you'd think, well, static dilithium, well, it's only taking 20, it'll run comfortably there. It did, but we weren't running anything else at the time. Okay, and you've got to remember that all of these resources, your program's actually sharing it with, this is a subroutine of something bigger here. So the costs here are really non-trivial, and that's what makes an exercise like this interesting. It's also what makes interesting, like Dan Sprenkels is here, and with Joppe Boas and Jos Rennes, they've got this paper in the last couple of weeks where they get this sort of footprint for dilithium, like the 36K, down to like 1/5 of that size. And this is like a really impressive result that you should check out, but it's not part of what we did. It's sort of way too late. So go and look at that and talk to them while you're here. Okay, so suppose we actually want to update the firmware on our board. Firmware is about 50K worth of binary. The crypto involved, like the actual crypto software, is about 6K. So it depends if you're updating the crypto at the same time. Okay. And then you can see, well, you're going to need like 4% more data transfer, or 1% more, or maybe 10% more, so max 10%. If you're just doing a plain old software update with your suit metadata using a post-quantum signature, so that's not so bad. If you need to include your post-quantum crypto in the update because there's been a change to the algorithm, or the implementation's insecure, then you might be like 120% bigger or something. You can see this really makes a big difference here. So Falcon is really fast, the signatures are quite small, but the actual binary of the thing is a bit bigger in this case, which was the cost of its speed. So putting this into real use cases, we take 4 typical use cases. So you can see we've got like 3 platforms, 4 use cases, and like 5 algorithms or whatever. So we've got a lot of dimensions to cover here, which will simplify things and say, if you're doing like a 5K, like you're updating one module, or you're updating the firmware without the crypto lib, so these are your smallest kinds of typical updates, then what really matters for you is speed and signature size. Okay, there's not that much data being transferred. And here, Falcon really has a clear advantage over dilithium and over LMS. Okay. On the other hand, if you're going to include the crypto in the thing, okay, so here I say 50K including the crypto libs, but there should be, these things aren't commuting or associating or something. There should be parentheses to say, well, it's a 50K, and then we're going to include the crypto libs on top of this. The larger the crypto lib, the more data you have to transfer, and you're not transferring this over like a USB cable onto your board. This is an actual radio transmission. So the more you send, the more the energy you're going to spend on actually receiving the data. And that radio reception, or that radio connection, is what's going to really impose a massive cost on you. It's going to take an enormous time cost, so it might take you a minute to transfer the thing now. And you can imagine that that's using up a lot of your power as you do it. So in this sort of context, we would argue that you're better off using LMS, just looking at the trade-off between the resources that you need to actually run the thing, but also the network transfer costs here. LMS is a simple scheme with small code, so you're going to minimize this overhead here while maintaining security and so on. Then you can say, well, let's go to like a large firmware update, so where you're really doing something massive. I mean, at this point, the moral is it doesn't really matter what you do at this point, because the cost of just transferring the thing, actually like reading the data, this is going to dominate all of your other costs. So just choose your favorite thing that's actually secure here, and that should be fine. So that's basically all I want to tell you right now. We liked Falcon for very small things, we liked LMS for things in the middle, and we like whatever you like for larger updates. There's no clear winner, it really depends on your context. When you're looking for a context, the other thing I want to do here is just really advertise Riot. It's a really easy platform to develop on. It's very portable. You can tell yourself, well, my code is now going to run on like 240 different things. So check it out, get involved. There's a really nice dynamic open community around this as well. And I'll be here for the rest of the morning if you have any questions. In the meantime, find your evil twins.
Questions for Benjamin?
A question about the usage of the RFC update mechanism. There's also a standard called the update framework, which is used for different operating systems and programming languages. How do they relate, and how did you decide which of those frameworks to take?
So I can tell you how I decided. I just did what my operating systems colleagues told me to do. So I don't know how they chose between these things, but Suit was what they've been doing. I think Suit Codes, they're even involved in the RFC for their particular way of doing it. So, I mean, I guess that's their choice. It's for them what's working for Riot. I think it'd be definitely interesting to look at this in other contexts where it's not the same system, sure. But that's a choice that was made for me, and I don't have a great deal of information about its, the why of this. But thanks for the suggestion of comparing this. It's a good idea.
Thank you.
There are questions for Benjamin? I do have a quick question. You did the experiments for IoT devices, low end. Imagine that you relax a bit the constraint on the device. If you scale it up, but not much, would change? At which point would change the situation, if changes at all?
Yeah, I think it depends in terms of what you're scaling up. I mean, one of the things here that was really impacting us was like the fact that we're talking about transferring over low power radio, and if you're moving to something where maybe you're scaling up to a better network connection or having more power to run the thing with, a bigger battery, then that would have a big impact on the sort of conclusions we had. In terms of running a more powerful device, having a bit more memory would make a difference for the speed that you could get for some of these things, for sure. Or like the kind of dilithium that you could run on the smaller things. But it wouldn't really change the other dimensions of the problem, like the size of the update that you're using. Yeah, so I think there would be some impact from this, not necessarily that much. But it's really sensitive to the context, I think.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Ben. Oh, there is a question there.
Sorry, one more. Hang on. We have people on Zulip. Question from James Muir. I guess you did pre-hash at DSA with ed 25519. Was there any reason you used SHA-256 rather than SHA-512?
Because of the suit standard, basically. Like what was in the RFC, it's like do SHA-256 and use these signatures. So we did that. One of the things that we had to decide on was, well, when we go to post-quantum, what hash function are we going to use? Especially because it's not just, well, there's like a hash which plugs into the signature. You're going to hash the entire software update, so the performance there really matters. That's where, I mean, we based this decision partly on the fact that Falcon and Dilithium, they're specified to use SHA-3. Or the other factor here was that Adrian Herman, his thesis was basically all about running these different hash functions on all of these different devices and comparing their performance. And so taking his results into account and the fact that this was what the standard was, that's why we used SHA-3 there and not comparing the same hash function on the two. So, but there's a lot of detail about this in the paper as well, comparing these things and talking about the choice. Yeah. So thanks for the question, James.
Other question from the audience or online? Not, let's thank Benjamin again.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Nina Bindel from TU Darmstadt. Drive quantum safe towards post-quantum security for vehicle-to-vehicle communications. Nina, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Drive, not Dive. That's the next project coming then on Real Crypto 2023. Good morning, everyone. So I'm talking today about vehicle-to-vehicle communication, which is an approach to increase the situational awareness of the driver. And it is estimated that it will prevent up to 615,000 collisions every year in the US alone. Moreover, it is estimated that there will be a reduction of congestion from 20 to 30%, and also a reduction in CO2 emission of 5%. Moreover, it is estimated that by 2025, there will be 1 million connected cars globally. And now the question is, of course, will they be secure? And since we're in the post-quantum session, will they be also secure against quantum attackers? Now, this is an important and interesting question because of the lifespan of vehicles. So at the moment, the record-holding quantum computer is still 72 qubits, and it is estimated, or a study showed, that quantum computing experts estimate that in 15 to 30 years, quantum computers will be able to break RSA 2048 with a probability of at least 50%. However, vehicles have an average lifespan of 15 years, and that means cars that are manufactured like today or in the next few years might be still around after the quantum era has started. And in my talk today, I would like to present work in progress about this vehicle-to-vehicle communication. And I will start with introducing what does it mean, what is secure vehicle-to-vehicle communication, and what are the challenges when we try to transition it to post-quantum security. And our answer to that will be standard compliant hybrid, classical post-quantum hybrid solution that I will also present. All right, so let's buckle in and let's start. So V2V communication, as mentioned, is to increase the situational awareness of the driver. That means, for example, a driver is notified if a car is approaching a hidden intersection. The V2V communication is described in these two standards that I'm listing here for completeness. And at the core of these standards are so-called basic safety messages. These safety messages are broadcast 10 times per second, and they include information such as direction, speed, time, location, and also brake and acceleration status. Now, how do we make this secure? What does it mean to be secure? Essentially, it means to authenticate these messages before you broadcast them. And in the IEEE 1609.2 standard, it is described how to do that. So more concretely, it describes the secure transmission of messages, the cryptographic operations needed, and also the certificate management. And the security goal here is to protect messages from attacks such as eavesdropping, spoofing, alteration, and replay. All right, so let's see how this works. Assume you have two cars, a sender and a receiver, although in reality, actually both cars are sending and receiving messages all the time. Now assume the sender has a public secret key here, and it first collects this information before it encodes it into this BSM, and then uses the secret key to sign this BSM. Now, the signature algorithm that is used in the description of the IEEE standard is ECDSA, which is quantum vulnerable. So essentially, we want to replace the ECDSA here with a post-quantum alternative. Now, the car then broadcasts the signature on the BSM, and the certificate, including the public key, and we call this the SPDU or the SPDU package. Now the receiver first extracts a public key and then uses this public key to verify whether the signature is valid, and if it is, then it sends the BSM information to the display system, let's say. Now there are a few things I would like to point out. So first of all, the public key certificate, which has been created by a certificate authority, has to be sent with the signature and the BSM. And the reason is that this public key changes every 5 minutes for privacy reasons. So it uses pseudonyms instead of really the user identity. In practice, however, the certificate is not sent with every BSM, but only every 5 BSMs it has to be communicated. That means the certificate is sent approximately every half a second. Now still, these packages should be small, and in particular, there should be, the standard defines, they should be smaller than 2,304 bytes. Moreover, both the transmission as also the verification have to be in milliseconds to give the receiver as much time as possible to react. Now, from these restrictions, in particular from the size restriction of 2,304 bytes, you can already guess that we will run into challenges when we switch this to post-quantum. We have seen these numbers just in the talk, or some of these numbers just in the talk before. These are the public key sizes and the signature sizes in comparison with the yellow ECDSA. But let's zoom in a little bit by taking out some of the candidates with the larger numbers. And here you can still see a comparison that the signature and the public key sizes, one of these values are usually much larger than the ECDSA one. And so we might have a danger of BSM loss. And this gets even worse. The IEEE 609.2 makes heavy use of a primitive called implicit certificate to save space. Let me explain what this is by first explaining explicit certificates. So in an explicit root certificate at the top, the CA self-signs this certificate, and then the user explicit certificates include the public key of the user, signed, and a signature created by the CA over this public key or over this certificate. Now, this is different in implicit certificates. The root certificate is the same. However, in the user implicit certificate, there's only a reconstruction value included. So not explicitly the public key and not explicitly the signature, but just implicitly. How is it included implicit? The user's public key can be reconstructed, so computed from the reconstruction value, and the CA's public key. And so this makes sense if the signature and public key are larger than this reconstruction value. And we know how to construct this from elliptic curves, namely it is the elliptic curve Q-Vanstone scheme, but there's no construction from post-quantum cryptography, and we tried to construct from lattices and failed. So that means not only will the total package sizes be larger from the larger public key and signature sizes, but also from the switch to explicit certificates. And here you can see the resulting sizes, the total package sizes on the right-hand side. And the gray line indicates the 2,304 bytes, and what you can see is that unfortunately, the total packet size, if you just naively replace ECDSA wherever you use it with post-quantum, it just won't work. It's just not compliant with the standard. So what we will do is to propose standard-compliant classical post-quantum hybrid solutions. And interestingly here is that why this hybrid approach is suggested by many standardization agencies such as NIST, ETSI, and IETF for security reasons. Here we can actually use it to make it standard compliant. What is this hybrid idea? Very briefly, essentially you use two schemes, for example, a post-quantum and ECDSA, and you combine it in such a way that the combined or the hybrid scheme is secure as long as at least one of the schemes is secure. Now, let us start with a very simple hybrid, namely we create a hybrid certificate. We have a post-quantum or a Falcon certificate. We use Falcon as the instantiation, and an ECDSA certificate. That means the sender has this larger certificate. And then remember there is this 5-message cycle that I mentioned, so we have to communicate the certificate every 5 messages. So in the first SPDU, the entire certificate is communicated, and an ECDSA signature. And then from the second SPDU on, a hybrid signature is included and just a hash of the certificate. Now, why couldn't we include the hybrid signature in the first one? Well, again, the size requirement. So the first SPDU, just including the ECDSA signature and the entire certificate, is already 1,800 bytes large, while the hybrid signature alone is 730 bytes large. So it just doesn't fit. And that means, in comparison with the pure ECDSA SPDU, the first message is much, much larger, and then from the second SPDU on until the 5th one, we have about 4 to 5 times larger SPDUs. Something that I would like to emphasize here is that the first SPDU is only protected by the security of ECDSA, but from the second to the 5th message on, we rely on both classical and post-quantum security. Right, correct. So we have our first hybrid, and it is actually compliant with the standard. However, the packages are still rather large, and that means that the security or the security threat due to the package loss is actually greater than the security threat due to signature forgeries by a quantum attacker. And this led to our second hybrid, which we call the partially post-quantum hybrid. And the idea here is follows. In the beginning, when I explained the V2V, the secure V2V communication, I mentioned that the ECDSA public key is changed every 5 minutes for privacy reasons. Now, after this 5 minutes, after the key is used, it is valid for a maximum time of 1 week. All right, but then probably within a week, even a very powerful quantum adversary might not be or is unlikely to forge signatures. However, the signature that is used on certificates, or rather the corresponding public secret key size, public and secret key, is valid long enough to be vulnerable to quantum attacks. And that means in this partially post-quantum hybrid, we protect the integrity of the ECDSA key, but we do not protect the signatures on each of the BSMs. How does that look a little bit more concretely? The ECDSA certificate is just the same as before, and the post-quantum certificate still includes a signature, a post-quantum signature by the CA. However, it signs the ECDSA public key. And then what we do is the sender still has this certificate to be able to also instantiate it with other schemes than Falcon. We introduce a fragmentation of the certificates, and then we need as much SPDUs to compute a certificate until all the fragments have been communicated. Once this is done, the ECDSA key from the classical certificate and the ECDSA key from the post-quantum certificate can be compared and can be checked that they are the same. The rest of the SPDUs, if there are any remaining, are then just the original ECDSA SPDUs. And this leads to the following size comparison. So in the first line, you just see the pure ECDSA for comparison, and the second one, you see the true hybrid that I already showed you. And then the last 4 rows are the partially post-quantum hybrids with different instantiations. And you can see for Falcon, Dilithium, and XMSS, the first SPDU is larger, but since the entire certificate fits into one SPDU, the remaining messages have the same size as the original ECDSA size. We could also use Things Plus as an instantiation. However, we need all 5 SPDUs to actually communicate the certificate plus a last signature. All right, so before I would like to conclude my talk, I would like to talk a little bit about the, I want to talk first about the number of maximal supported vehicles, which is indeed a very important metric in this V2V setting, because the question is how many cars can communicate with each other at the same time. So if you are just approaching a lonely hidden intersection, then 2 cars are enough. But if you think of a very large intersection, for example, in the middle of New York City, how many cars can be at this intersection at the same time? And so for ECDSA, this number is 183. And the largest number for our hybrids is indeed with the partially post-quantum hybrid with Falcon, and there we can support up to 107 vehicles. And so this is, of course, not the same as ECDSA, but there are other mechanisms that we can use. For example, clever sieving to sieve out the most important messages. So for example, imagine you're on a big highway and you're in a traffic jam, then not every message that says, yeah, I'm still standing, there's no speed. These are just not as important as other messages. All right, now I would like to talk about the threat model and the limitations just briefly. So we do show also with provable security and the reductionist approach, we do show the security of our hybrids, which I don't have time to cover this in detail, but I would like to explain the assumptions that we made. So just as a reminder, the security goal is to protect messages from attacks such as eavesdropping, spoofing, alteration, and replay. And so that means what we allow in the security model, obviously, is for the attacker to replay, to delay, to drop, to alter, to observe, because they can just look at the messages, the public keys and everything, and also to trigger SPDUs. Now, I would also like to say what we do not allow. And so we don't allow side-channel attacks, which is also a limitation of our work. We also assume that the certificate authority that creates the certificates is honest, and we also assume that we can immediately check whether these certificates are valid or not. And for this, the cars actually need a root certificate. They need to go up a certificate chain. And there's also a question, since we have larger certificates, can we actually verify the validity of these certificates as fast as we can do that for ECDSA? This is still an open question and a very interesting one, as I think. As a summary, the takeaway points that I would like you to take home is that the naive swap of ECDSA with post-quantum signatures is not possible, that we propose these standard compliant hybrids, and we are able to do that because we look at the application and we tailor then this post-quantum extension to this application by looking what can a quantum adversary actually do. Also, there's lots to do. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to the question if we have time.
Thank you, Nina. Any question for Nina from the room or from Zulip?
IEEE Wave Security not only uses ECDSA, but AES CCM and ECIES. Have you thought about replacing ECIES by a PQ secure solution, e.g. structured lattices based CHEM or Psych, or better instantiating HPKE, a bit long, by PQ secure CHEM signatures, size and performance constraints?
Right. Thank you very much. That's a very good question. So in the standard, there is the authenticity part, but there's also a part about confidentiality, where also these schemes are used. We have not looked at that. I think we will run also into similar problems about the public key size and how do you exchange keys, because now these messages are broadcast. How do you do that? This is still a very interesting open question that we have not looked at so far.
Other questions for Nina? I do have a very quick one about the future. You said there's a lot of things to do, and you also show a picture about what you cover and what not. What's the next immediate step you see among all the things you showed?
So what we focus in our work so far is really the size requirements. And an interesting approach is also how do these hybrid solutions, how do they compare performance-wise, and this is the next step that we benchmark it essentially.
Thanks. If there are no other questions, let's thank Nina again. The next speaker is Tobias Schneider from NXP. He's going to speak about surviving FOcalypse, securing PQC implementation in practice. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. So as the title said, it's about securing PQC implementation in practice, and in particular about one specific challenge that affects some of the PQC candidates that we informally coined the FOcalypse. So before we go into this cataclysmic event, let me first motivate why it's a practically relevant topic for NXP. So as you know, the world is getting more and more connected, and we at NXP are shipping billions of devices, ranging from automotive over industrial to IoT. And a lot of these things are deployed in security-critical applications. So any potential attack could have significant impact on our customers. And that's why we built the security of today on the crypto standards of today. But as you know, soonish, NIST will announce the standard of the future, so we're already looking into what we need to prepare our devices for this upcoming change. So last year, Jopo was standing here and talking about some general challenges of PQC and embedded devices, focusing mostly on secure boot and updates. And this year the focus is on physical security, in particular power-based sidechain attacks. So as you've seen in a couple of presentations already, the world is not like this, so it's not a black box with a key inside and the attacker only sees the inputs and the outputs, but the box is rather gray because you can measure either the power or the timing behavior, and from that extract the key. Since all the security is based on the confidentiality of this key, our practical secure products have to integrate dedicated countermeasures against this threat. While for current crypto, we have a quite good understanding of what are the attacks and what are the countermeasures, and that enables us to create practically secure and efficient implementations that can be even certified. For PQC, the situation is a bit less clear. So while there have been some academic works in recent years on attack and countermeasures, we are still not 100% sure what is the most powerful attack, and also regarding countermeasures, there are very limited industrial results. So that's also why when we started to look into this question, we initially had no idea what kind of countermeasure to use and how to configure it. So we spent a bit more time looking into some of the challenges in detail, and some of the results are summarized in this presentation. Maybe to foreshadow a bit, we propose that for some of the affected candidates, it might be significantly more costly to achieve the same level of protection that we currently have in our certified products. At least that's what we fear. So what is this FO collapse? So the FO refers to the Fujisaka-Okamoto transformation that is used by a couple of NIST finalists to transform a CPA secure PKE into a CCA secure CAM. And here's an exemplary instantiation how it's used in the running example of the presentation, which is Kyber, but it should also be used in Saber like this in a very similar way. So we have a CPA secure decryption that decrypts a ciphertext using a long-term secret SK. And since this is only CPA secure, we can send in a chosen ciphertext, an invalid ciphertext, and we might get the secret key on the output. To prevent this, the transformation basically adds a re-encryption of this plaintext P using the public key. That is then compared to the original ciphertext, and only if they match, the scheme proceeds. Now, our sidechain anniversary wants to recover the long-term secret SK. A first strategy could be to just send valid ciphertext and then observe the leakage of the key-dependent operations. Here we can assume that the attacker has created their own ciphertext by just encrypting P's with a public key, so we can assume they know P. But what they also then know is everything that happens after P, because the re-encryption as it's used in these schemes is completely deterministic, so they can just compute all the intermediates based on their knowledge of P and the public key. That means for us, we would be good with just protecting the DPA decryption against leakage, which would be nice. However, as you've seen before, we can do a lot more if we send invalid ciphertext. In that case, P is actually not known by the attacker, but it depends on a bit, or at least on some bits of SK. So in the worst case, we would imagine that P could be either 0 or 1, depending on one bit of SK. So the attacker could now also not only attack the decryption, but also make guesses for P to recover information about SK. Since the whole re-encryption is deterministic, the same applies for every following intermediate in this whole big part of the re-encryption. So now, if you want to protect the whole decapsulation, we not only have to protect the decryption, but every module that basically touches P. So we have to protect the whole decapsulation. Now you could just say, okay, then we just spend a bit extra to protect every module on the same level. But that's not the whole story. The thing is that these chosen ciphertext sidechain attacks are actually quite a bit different to the DPA that we're used to. For one, we have basically millions of points of interest that we can potentially exploit for an attack. Because everything in the re-encryption is deterministic, we can easily derive guesses for each intermediate and run an attack. In the worst case, we even just have two leakage classes that we need to distinguish, like either P is 0 or P is 1, which makes it even a bit easier. And lastly, we don't even need a separate device for profiling, because we can just build templates on the same device by encrypting our guesses for P ourselves. So that has been used in quite a lot of academic papers to break even protect implementations. The most recent example is by Ueno et al. At this year's TCHES, appropriately titled The Curse of Re-encryption. So now that you've seen a bit why it is bad, let's try to quantify a bit how bad it actually is in practice, so to by quantifying these curves. So as mentioned before, there have been a couple of works on attacks and countermeasures, but it's our impression that the whole impact of the attack has not been fully explored yet. While all of the attack papers note that it might be a challenge to protect against their threat, they don't really provide a concrete recommendation what it would cost in practice to actually avoid that. And to start to fill this gap, we, together with a team from UCL, has looked at the case study of Kyber, of what it would mean, how powerful the attacks are actually for Kyber and what it would mean to protect against them. So to start, we set a common traces threshold for security, so 1 million traces. That means they should an attack should not succeed with less traces. We also looked at different noise levels because that strongly impacts how much you need to spend on additional countermeasures. So on the one hand, you have like a lower noise level where you just do basically pure software on a general purpose core, and then you have a bit maybe higher noise where you have some parts on hardware or even some noise generators. In particular, we looked at Kyber, but due to the similarities, we expect that the result should translate nearly one-to-one also to Saber. So I'm not going too much into detail what the methodology was that we used, maybe just from a high-level point of view. We basically just counted the leaking variables for both attack strategies, so targeting the decryption versus using invalid server text and exploiting the leakage of the re-encryption. Then we estimated the number of traces required for an attack and compared that for different noise levels. So let's start by looking at an unprotected version of Kyber. So here in the figure you can see with blue, that's like the standard DPA on the decryption, and the orange one is this attack on the re-encryption. On the x-axis you see the noise level, and these are our two considered cases, higher on the left, lower on the right, and the y-axis is the number of traces required for an attack. Now if you put our 1 million threshold in here, it would look like this. So I guess it's obvious for everybody that if we now look at these intersection points, it is clear that unprotected Kyber does not provide sufficient security for any of the two cases. So that's not very surprising, but what we can also see from this figure is that there is a gap of roughly a factor 100 between the two attack strategies. So not only does the leakage in the re-encryption forces us to protect the whole decapsulation, it also allows for much stronger attacks than what we're used to. And in the next step, we try to estimate a bit what it would cost to protect against this threat. Maybe just a brief intro into masking. So with masking, you try to split your sensitive shares into your sensitive variables into multiple shares. And the higher your D is, usually the more security you have, but also the more you need to pay. So in practice, you try to find a good balance between sufficient protection and efficient implementation. What we observe for our pre-quantum certified products that we usually have a D equals 2 or 3. And on the right, you can see what happens with masked Kyber if we increase the number of shares. So it's obvious that the number of required traces for an attack goes up. And that would translate to a value of D equals 6 for the standard DPA case versus D equals 8 for this leakage in the re-encryption. So we can see that due to this leakage, we need to increase the number of shares by 2, which would result in more costly implementations. For the higher noise case, it's not as strong, but still we have an increase of 1 share. And in any case, we expect that first order masking will not be sufficient for any of these cases. Okay, so now that we've talked a bit about why is it bad and how bad is it, let's spend some slides on what we can do to survive in this threat. The straightforward thing would be to implement higher order masking with the D that we've estimated before. So here in the table you can see the overhead introduced by masked Kyber compared to an unprotected implementation. So maybe just a short disclaimer, this is not the most recent and most optimized implementation, but still the general message should also translate to the a bit more efficient implementation that has been proposed recently. Now if we look at the table and we look at D equals 3, we see that it actually introduces already quite a high overhead, and the switch from 2 to 3 is actually a factor of 18. That's actually quite significant. But for the lower noise case, it's even worse because we go from 6 to 8, which doesn't even fit on the device that we looked at. So to draw like a preliminary summary, what we expect is that the leakage caused by this re-encryption in the FO, it will complicate the integration of the affected chems quite a lot, and it will cost a lot to get them to the same level of protection that we have for current crypto, at least with the current methods. So what are maybe some alternatives that we can use to maybe make our situation a bit better? One direction that we're looking into is maybe replacing this re-encryption with the FO with explicit signature verification. And here the idea is that signature verification is using only public values, so they don't need any sidechain protections. And some first experiments using carbon dilithium showed quite a nice speed-up factor. But of course, that's not a generic solution. That might work for some internal use cases where you can define your own protocol, like with firmware updates or something. Maybe a bit more generic, what we could do in terms of standardization, we could maybe add some kind of filter mechanism to the scheme to filter out these relevant ciphertexts that are useful for sidechain attacks. That has been proposed in some of the attack papers. In one where they use very low entropy ciphertexts to conduct the attack, but the current solutions don't really cover the whole attack space. Another direction would be to maybe to randomize the re-encryption a bit, because the determinism in the re-encryption makes it really easy for an attacker to predict intermediates. So randomizing it would not completely avoid that problem, but at least make it a bit harder. And maybe the last thing is to find something completely new, maybe some kind of leakage-aware transformation or something in that similar direction. So to conclude, we expect that the leakage caused by this FO re-encryption will significantly complicate the deployment of these affected chems. It will not make it impossible, probably, at least if you have sufficient noise, which you anyway, I guess, should have, but it will be quite costly, at least with the current methods. Since the field is quite young, we expect that maybe, or we hope, that there will be some innovation in the coming years which might alleviate the situation. Further research is required. So, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now, but you can also reach us via pqc@nxp.com.
Thank you. Thank you. Any question for Tobias? Mr. Franzulli?
So when with the FO transform alternatives, I'm not sure if there are any places you could apply something like Bonnet cats in order to get a transformation that has less sensitivity to the intermediate state and does a lot less with it.
So you're saying you're not hopeful that we find an alternative transformation? Is that the question?
Yeah, I'm not hopeful. I think it's an interesting question, but I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Yeah, there's some ideas where you try to maybe level some approaches, like it's done with symmetric encryption, where you maybe try to isolate the really leakage critical parts into maybe small modules that you have to protect a lot, and then the rest you protect a bit less. So maybe that's something to look into.
Thanks for the talk. So I was wondering, did you also look at NTRU, which does not do a re-encryption during decapsulation?
So we personally, or at least I personally did not. I think some of us at NXP did. So maybe we can talk offline about that. But I think in this paper they looked at some N2 variant. I'm not sure which one. Maybe Let's talk offline. I have to look that up.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Tobias? If not, let's thank Tobias again. The next talk will be online. Where is the research on cryptographic transition and agility? Will be given by David Hott, if you can. Okay. David, do you listen us?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks
Please.
to the Real World Crypto Program Committee for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm David Ott. I work for VMware Research, where I am a senior researcher and academic program director. I'd like to talk to you today about where is the research on cryptographic transition and agility. Thanks to Kenny Patterson from ETH Zurich and Dennis Moreau, my colleague from VMware, for discussions on these ideas. Thanks also to the CRA's Computing Community Consortium, CCC, which held a workshop a while back, which many people from this audience may have attended. So my organization appreciates NIST's leadership in developing quantum safe cryptography standards in collaboration with the cryptographic research community. Since the process began in 2016, we've seen 69 proposals analyzed and vetted in rounds to the current list of 7 finalists and 8 alternates. Draft standards focusing on just a few algorithms will likely be available soon, as we all know. I've been thinking some time now that post-quantum cryptography deployment is about 2 overlapping challenges. On the one hand is post-quantum crypto migration, which is all about the specific algorithms. Their key sizes, ciphertext sizes, digital signature sizes, the associated compute requirements, memory processing entropy, implementation issues, including side channel resistance, how additional standards will need to accommodate the new algorithms, and so on. But the other overlapping challenge is cryptographic agility, which is all about enabling cryptographic change in an ongoing way. So cryptographic agility, as we all know, is the ability to reconfigure an algorithm or an application or a system with a different cryptographic algorithm or implementation. And it should support such things as ongoing transition to new algorithms, updating or changing an implementation, modifying key configuration parameters, retiring deprecated algorithms, and so on. Cryptographic agility takes a broader perspective on change. It's not just about one transition, but provisioning our systems for ongoing transitions. This timeline reiterates a point I've seen Brian Lamacchia from Microsoft make many times in his excellent public talks, that we need to remember that crypto algorithms and standards have a life cycle. As device and compute capabilities gradually advance, algorithms become weaker over time and need new parameter settings or alternative standards. So for many people, the notion of crypto agility is all about enabling change using sound software engineering practices. Code is organized with modularity and well-chosen APIs. In object-oriented programming language contexts, interfaces are abstracted and then implemented through class hierarchies. So the advantage of all of this is that new algorithm standards like PQC can be added as encapsulated code modules. And then these code changes can simply be implemented as modification to function and library calls. Cipher suite negotiation provides another framework for crypto agility within the context of secure communication protocols. New standard implementations can be introduced as cipher suites. Deprecated standards can be eliminated from acceptable cipher suites. And we can imagine the addition of PQC being handled in this manner. One concern, of course, is how to manage new crypto implementations before they have been adequately hardened. To address this concern, hybrid approaches have been proposed and represent another agility mechanism. In this approach, we combine 2 or more crypto algorithms, usually executed in serial. The nice part of this scheme is that the security properties hold as long as one of the component algorithms is secure. So for example, a new post-quantum crypto algorithm can be added to a FIPS 140 compliant algorithm. Concerns, of course, include implementation complexity, performance, and key management. Hybrids can also be used in the context of X509 certificates. Once again, this allows early adopters to add quantum safety before PQC standards are ready or implementations are fully hardened. Since PKI involves many parties, protocols, and software stacks, adoption's more challenging than it looks. But overall, the approach gives us a mechanism for introducing crypto agility over time. So the question I'd like to ask then is, given this lineup of useful crypto agility mechanisms, are we covered? Are we covered for future cryptographic transitions in an ongoing way, including post-quantum crypto migration? And as you might have guessed, my message in this talk is that we are not. I'd like to challenge the research community here to consider the evolving context of computing over the last 20 years. Have we really put enough effort into understanding how cryptographic transition should be managed and managed securely? Have we kept up with 20 years of computing advancement and the challenging context of crypto usage? I contend there is much more for applied crypto and research community members to sort out before crypto agility can effectively be used in the applications and systems that we now build and manage. So one of the big gaps that I see in the crypto agility sphere is the way our current thinking about the problem caters to crypto providers and overlooks a key class of stakeholders, enterprise consumers. These include IT infrastructure teams, IT InfoSec professionals, business operations teams. After all, it is enterprise customers who end up deploying and managing crypto in an ongoing way. So while the agility mechanisms that we have talked about provide an important set of primitives, I believe there's a gap between them and the scaled compute infrastructures that we manage today. In fact, enterprise consumers need approaches to orchestrating change over larger units of compute infrastructure, data centers, distributed applications, edge computing environments, not just single hosts or applications or connections. Have we connected the dots between low-level agility mechanisms and enterprise consumers? Have we developed solutions that allow enterprise consumers to create crypto policy and press a button to implement it across a compute infrastructure? Do we support full tool sets and frameworks for identifying migration instances, doing impact testing, providing auditable configurations, and so on? Secure point-to-point communications is obviously a key building block for cryptographic agility. But today's compute infrastructures are complex in many dimensions. Units of communications and compute are clusters and not endpoints. They include private data centers, public cloud hosting arrangements, edge computing environments, and myriad client devices. Many elements are hosted by third-party providers. Domains have their dependencies and separate administrative challenges. How does an enterprise admin execute crypto migration and agility across a complex federation of infrastructure characterized by heterogeneity, multiple network domains, and multiple solution providers? Some starter research questions and issues include multi-point and distributed secure communication protocols. How might crypto graduate from configuration-driven to policy-driven? How do crypto orchestration and management schemes work? How to navigate infrastructure providers and multiple parties? Real-world enterprises license and deploy hundreds of software packages and services. This means that migration will depend on many third-party suppliers, along with in-house solution developers for some organizations. Many of these will be behind or lack readiness for post-quantum crypto transition for all kinds of reasons. Lack of expertise, integration with customer deployments are problematic, hard-coded solutions, lack of configuration hooks, many things. So the research question here is, what approaches are there for enabling cryptographic agility in legacy applications? encapsulation, composites, hybrids, proxies, and what are the performance issues, the attack surfaces, demonstrations of correctness, analysis for correctness, and how do we manage crypto agility for legacy hardware? As shown in the figure, one approach for communications is the use of VPNs to wrap legacy data exchanges in crypto-agile communication pipes. But what are the other approaches? What is a broader picture of approaches, and how do they work? So as cloud computing environments have evolved, so have applications. Today's applications are more and more distributed, decoupled, and dynamic. Distributed in the way that they are deployed and scaled across multiple environments, decoupled in the way that they can be conveniently moved from one hardware environment to another and one software environment to another, and dynamic in the way that they can be scaled up and down. But complex applications using service mesh can also mean the decomposition of functionality into separate microservices, interactions between multiple parties, each providing their own crypto stack. And somehow crypto agility and migration needs to be implemented to achieve a unified outcome. So research questions that I see here include how to enable crypto agility for container schemes and their associated control planes, collections of microservices, service mesh, serverless paradigms, and many other things. So finally, we point out that a key challenge in crypto agility will be securing that agility and making sure it is used correctly. The crypto community is especially cognizant of the many ways crypto can be misconfigured. Crypto agility will need to be packaged judiciously. Capabilities will need to be matched to admin expertise in the right way and not exposed otherwise. And the protection of crypto agility schemes will need solutions from the research community. We need to understand the new attack surfaces created by indirection and how they can be protected. How can we, for example, use modern compute isolation features like trusted execution environments, attestation mechanisms to verify crypto at runtime, and formal methods to better define security properties and model threats. A big point here is that despite these challenges, the lack of crypto agility really isn't an option. Back to the enterprise infrastructure operators. Without agility, how will transition to safe algorithms be accomplished? So finally, I'd like to summarize. We've talked about the need for crypto agility, and yet the challenges to realizing crypto agility are considerable. I've mentioned a number of them: enabling enterprise stakeholders, complex infrastructures, legacy applications, modern applications, and securing agility. So some key insights to note are the research challenges. There's a significant gap between existing agility approaches and the scaled, policy-driven, orchestrated frameworks needed by today's enterprise consumers of cryptography. We need to better address decades of advancement in modern cloud infrastructure and the complex applications deployed on them. Okay, thank you for patiently listening to my thoughts on cryptographic agility and the challenges associated with them. Enjoy the rest of Real World Crypto 2022. Thanks.
Okay. Is David online, right? So you can hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Are there any questions for David from the audience or from Zulip? No questions. I do have an obvious one. You gave us sort of homework to us. Can you give also a bit of roadmap? What do you feel is important to address first and then after?
A bit of roadmap. Boy, I think one of the things that could be done is to take a lot of these high-level observations and to better analyze them into actionable spheres of research. I've said a lot of very high-level things here. The question is, can we formulate them as problems? Can we pick apart the pieces, the dimensions, the domains of contribution, so that a research conversation can be started in a meaningful way in each of them. I think that would be my comment.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? If not, let's thank David and all the speakers of the session. We now have a coffee break.